Just in time for your weekly most comprehensive look at the world of business and economics. Welcome to Business Redefined. The August 2020 legal notice number 156, I should say, kicked off the public service superannuation scheme through which members of the public service would be moved from the defined benefit scheme to a defined contributory scheme. And we are joined by Dr. Odundo, the chairperson of the public service superannuation scheme, to help us make sense of this. Welcome on set, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian.
There is the widespread view that we have a public pensions crisis in this country. Do you have that assessment?
It's true, Julius, I agree, because I was chief executive of Retirement Benefits Authority for close to 16 years. By the time I left, I left with a fund value of almost $1 trillion shillings. But during the same period, we're monitoring the government scheme, and this has accumulated over a period of time, because you see theirs is a pay-as-you-go. It's non-contributory. And that's why you find there's a pension crisis as far as the government's employees are concerned. And the move was very, very timely, because we've been actually pushing for a defined contribution for government scheme. And I'm happy that the minister, the CS, really pushed this to have it done. And from 1st of January this year, the scheme took off. And that crisis is there. And at least now, what we are seeing, we will stop the bleeding going forward. Like now, this particular month, the government will not incur any liability. So they'll just have that old scheme will remain as closed scheme.
Okay.
So that is true.
So when you talk about the kickoff was effective January 1st, 2021, we are now 2.5 months into it. How is the uptick?
Oh, it's very interesting that all employees below the age of 45, those ones were joining in automatically. And the ones above the age of 45 were given the option to join the scheme by 31st of March, 2021. So it means anybody above still has the option to join. And that means going forward, after 31st March, then we'll close it, unless it is extended. From contribution side, the first month, all employees paid their contribution, and the government also has paid their share. So basically, we receive close to $2 billion from the employee and from the scheme, from the employer.
And in terms of the contributions, I understand the target is 7.5% from the employee side, but it is graduated. Just walk us through that.
Yeah, for the first year, they'll contribute 2%, and then they'll move to 5%, then they'll move to 7.5%. Those are the employees. But the government, from day one, they'll contribute their share, which is there of 15%.
15%, some would argue, is relatively high if you look at the industry standards, where I think typically we're looking at 7.5% from the employee and 7.5% being matched by the employer. Don't you think still that inflicts a huge liability on the state?
No, one thing that even we did when I was at RBA, the government actually sent a circular to all parastatal, all institutions to change when they went to contributory scheme, that to be able to have a good replacement rate, you need about 30%. Or to earn 30% of your salary. So it means that the employer should contribute 10, and the employer should contribute 20. And that was the circular which was sent out. So you can see we are still below that particular circular which went out, because they are only contributing 7.5, and the employer is contributing 15. Most schemes are contributing 10 and 20.
I should clarify that when you talk about the replacement ratio, you mean that once one retires, the level of income they will need to sustain their standard of living that they were prior to that.
Yes, that's what it means. Replacement with the level of income. It means that you should be able to earn something equivalent to 30% of your salary to be able to sustain yourself in retirement.
Are there public servants who are not eligible for the superannuation scheme?
No, public servants who are in permanent and pensionable are automatically eligible. The ones who are on contract, the government is working out to turn them into permanent pensionable so that they can also join the scheme. And then the one who are 45 and below is automatically joining the scheme. And the ones above that age, they have the option to join the scheme. But the ones who don't join the scheme will remain on the old scheme, which we shall treat as a closed scheme, but they will remain on the old scheme. But those are people above 45.
Then many would wonder, if you're running this superannuation scheme still under the government, why not just leverage the existence of NSSF to be able to run this fund? Because it sounds like we are reinventing the wheel here.
NSSF is more of a provident scheme, but this is a pension scheme. Okay, that's the main difference. And even the act which was there is not taken off; it's still in court. So these are people who are coming up with their own scheme. For example, Nation has their own scheme. At the same time, they're contributing to the NSSF. So, and the employees of government have always been on this non-contributory. By the time they leave, these guys have nothing. They expect money to be paid from the exchequer, from your taxes, and there are no funds set aside. So it really doesn't really help. And again, one advantage they will have, they will be able to run the scheme themselves as employees and the employer.
What are the challenges that often schemes are faced by, or pensioners for that matter, is that deductions are made, but they are not remitted? How do you forestall this risk within the superannuation scheme?
And that's the advantage of superannuation scheme, because this is a scheme within the government, okay? And the employees, the salaries are being deducted at a centralized place. So the contribution, like this first month of January, all the contribution came in. We didn't have a problem with contribution because it's coming from the center, this ICT center. And then the payment of the government share also comes from the treasury, because they are just given the figure from the salary payment center, the IPPD, and then they automatically send the money straight to the scheme. And we did open an account at Central Bank, so the money was sent to Central Bank. So we have an account of Public Service Superannuation Scheme within Central Bank, and that's where the money is. And
how many civil servants, or public servants for that matter, then have been graduated thus far, 2 months into it?
Yeah, in January we have about 384, which basically we're talking about almost 400,000 civil servants who have moved in. Because by what I saw, the data is like 384 who have just basically, 384,000 who have moved, yes. So we have almost 400,000. Eventually, if we have others who are going to join voluntarily, I'm looking at a figure of 400,000 public servants being in this scheme. It's a big scheme. It's going to be the largest scheme in the country.
And in terms of, this is national government focused. What about the devolved units?
Yeah, the devolved units have their own pension scheme. We have the CPF, which is for the counties, and we have the LAP fund for the counties. Yes. But this is a fund for the national public scheme. In
terms of returns, what sort of returns are you looking at? Because the reality out here is that a number of pension schemes then are facing the challenge of the fact that whereas they try to diversify their asset mix, whether it's real estate, fixed income, securities at the exchange, a number of them are not doing so well. So giving a return to pensioners has now become a challenge.
That's very true. When my trustees, we looked at this and we said the first 3 years, we are trying to accumulate capital and cash preservation. We just not going to start investing. The Retirement Benefits Authority investment guidelines requires us to invest in a basket of various investment vehicles. But as a start, we need to preserve cash so that even if we close that scheme tomorrow, we should be able to have to pay off the employees. So when we do cash preservation for the next 3 years, we are talking about a figure of close to 100 billion every year, and the figure is going to be about 300 billion in 3 years. And that alone, and if you invest right now, almost everybody is investing in government securities and government bonds. The returns are very high. So we decided that we shall invest in government securities only for the next 3 years. So from there, we can, if there's a pressure that we must put money in other, or if the other investment vehicle look lucrative, then that's the time we start going into shares and many other things. But for the next 3 years, capital preservation and capital accumulation and cash preservation.
One of the landmark regulatory changes in the recent past around the pension area is the mortgage regulations of 2020. And essentially what they did is to create a window where beneficiaries can access up to 40%, capped at 7 million, to be able to purchase a house. And this is all about affordable housing. If I have transitioned, if I'm a civil servant who has transitioned from the defined benefit now to the contributory scheme, I'm curious to know how that would be handled, because I'm straddling two areas here.
Yeah, because you see, the old scheme is a closed scheme. They have to do actual evaluation to determine how much is accrued to you. So that has not been done. And then the government also will decide if we do actual evaluation and come up with accrued benefit, will it be transferred to the new scheme? Do they have the money to transfer it to the new scheme? If they do that, then there'll be enough reserves which can comfortably give up mortgages. Because within the first month, the money you have put in is not enough even to reach that amount. But if they Once that is done, because they're going to do an actual evaluation to determine the actual liability and how much is entitled to, everybody is entitled, then they might decide how to do that. There are various ways of doing it, because in this, they can either take a long-term bond, which is 30 years, 40 years, and then now transfer that into the scheme and pay it over a period of 30 years. Okay, that's much easier for them to do. Or transfer certain assets which are not of a lot of value, or assets which they can easily, I saw that with the railway scheme, they transfer that asset which they're not using into the scheme.
Do you have any targets you're looking at in terms of onboarding public servants to the superannuation scheme that you're looking at, whether it's in the medium to long term?
One good thing is that we started early enough to do the preparations, and we have offloaded them all into the new scheme. Almost all of them are already in the scheme. So we're only waiting for those ones who are voluntary to join in, so they'll also come on board. And then that means everybody will be in. And it will be the largest scheme anyway.
And how does the team that you steward, I should say, manage the overheads? Is there some seed funding that you receive?
Yeah, in the initial years, the government has set aside some seed money to push, to get started the pension scheme. They've actually even seconded some of their staff to help us get the scheme started. But the scheme is going to run like any other private scheme. We are already going to advertise for service providers. We are going to have, initially, we are going to have administrators, the custodians, and the managers required by the RBA Act. But we are allowed to have internal administration eventually. But as a start, it's always good practice. You get somebody to set you off, and then you learn from them and then take off from there.
Right, and that point by Dr. Odundo takes us to a short break. Business Redefined will be back with a lot more on these conversations on the reforms taking place in the public service pension scheme. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Business Redefined. We are focusing on reforms taking place in the public service pension space, and we are privileged to have the chairperson of the Public Service Superannuation Scheme, Dr. Odundo. Welcome back on set.
Thank you, Julian.
Dr. A pensioner or someone preparing for their retirement is watching this and wondering, then how much should I have accrued ideally if I want to sustain the level of my living standard as we speak when I retire?
It's good you brought that question. I told you I'm also the director of the School of Pension Retirement Studies. I teach about retirement and also lecture at the University of Nairobi. And I'm a retiree. I retired from RBA. There are 5 things that I always tell people. When you retire, the most important thing is not pension, it's medical cover. Because when you get to that age, your body is no longer the same. The other time you're being taken care of by the employer. But now there's no employer taking care of you. You need a medical cover. And before I left, we started the post-retirement medical cover to be anchored on pension scheme. And I have seen it coming up. Even the PSS, that's what I was saying, my vision. The government is already working on policy, on post-retirement medical cover. They've done the guidelines under the Department of State. And now they're doing stakeholder sensitization so that when civil servants retire, they're able to be taken care of medically. And it really helps. So first thing you need is medical cover. Okay? The second thing you need now is liquidity. Liquidity now is a pension scheme coming in monthly. Okay? Liquidity, not investment. Turning investment into cash when you are sick is not easy. You might have a product and you can't sell it when you are sick. You need cash which comes in. Because what happens when you leave employment, if you're earning, let's say, 300,000, pension scheme will only give you 10% of what you used to, out of your accumulated funds. And that means you are in need of cash for day-to-day survival. And that's why you need to buy an annuity. At least getting that monthly will help you every month. That's the second thing. The third thing that I teach people to do when you retire, pay off all your loans. Don't go into retirement with loans. Me, I'm a retiree, and I've seen it, and I've seen retirees. Because when you go into retirement with the loans, first of all, you don't have the money to pay. Even if you go to consultancy, after doing consultancy, it takes 3-4 months for you to be paid. Yet the person, if it's mortgage, he wants to be paid immediately. So when you have a loan, it becomes very difficult for you to pay. And the fourth thing that I tell people, before you retire, start some business of your choice. Because when you retirement, you have a lot of time. Okay? You find that you have a lot of time to yourself. You need something to do on a day-to-day basis. And that is very, very important. And the last thing that you should have, the fifth one, is be close to your family. Because when retirement, nobody calls you. The people who are going to calling you is your family and your wife. The others will disappear. So be very close to them, so that by the time you get there, you have people around you.
I see. And you're saying this, and many people will tell you that majority of Kenya's labor force, if you look at statistics, only 2 out of every 10 are in a form of a pension scheme, and majority of them are in NSSF. So when you talk about something, for example, like liquidity, where someone has been remitting 200 shillings a month, they won't even have the liquidity to begin with. How do they tie it through then?
No, the people who are just relying on NSSF are really suffering, because one fund, you are just giving one-off contribution. When I retired, NSSF paid me only 200,000. What can you do with that? For all those 40 years that you've been working. So imagine most of the retirees might even get less than that. And after that, they're done. And that's why you find that people who have retired are still dependent on their children. And now, the way it is, children don't take care of their parents anymore. And retirees are suffering. And that's why one thing that I also want to anchor in the PSS, once we'll have the pension scheme, and we're looking forward to have that PSS AFIA, post-retirement medical care, and if possible, we also start a foundation which will take care of some of those people. You go out there, you see civil servants, they're just suffering. But now you need people now to contribute voluntarily to help them, but also it will be anchored. Because you find you had worked for the government, now you contributed so much, you are just out there very looking done, yet the same government can't help you. So that particular foundation will look at that.
Dr. Olunda, I'd like to get your thoughts on the NSSF Act of 2013, and why that's important is because this was one regulation which was expected to recast the pension scheme landscape in this country, especially around the contributory amounts, but it is still stalled in court because of that contested area.
Our position was, as regulators at that time, it's a very good idea when you have that minimum amount, which employer will pay, employee will pay 6%. But if you have a scheme which meets those thresholds, you should be able to start your own scheme. But what the issue which was being raised there, or which is in the Act, was that it was the NSSF to decide who pulls out. Okay? That's where the problem came, that they're the ones to decide you cannot come out. Yet you have a scheme, like the nation scheme. And again, employers will now find it very difficult that here there's a contributory scheme which is compulsory, 6%, 12% I'm taking to NSSF. Why should I have another scheme? You get where I'm coming from. The nation scheme will be, the employer will not say, I can't pay you 12% this other side, and another 12% I'm taking to NSSF. You'll have to choose. But because this is compulsory, I'll pay what is compulsory. So you can see the contest, and that's why you find the thing is stuck up to now.
And if you look at the supplementary budget for 2020-21, the current financial year, there has been a proposed reduction in the allocation to pensions from 118 billion shillings to about 110. And it always looks as though whenever it comes to the supplementary budget and we need to trim, the first low-hanging fruit tends to be the pensions. Is this something which concerns you?
Yeah, it's true. It concerns me because you've already seen a number of cases which are out there. This basically refers to the contributory scheme, and the people are really fighting for their payments. So it concerns me, and I always look for that people who have retired, they should be paid their money. And because the problem was these people are being paid from taxes. So when taxes go down in that particular year, the government might not have enough funds to pay. And that's why they have to go into a funded scheme. If they were funding it, there will be no issue. But these are money which is paid every year depending on how much is collected. So anytime there is a challenge, those are the areas that are likely to reduce.
I see.
Yeah, because it's easy.
And your closing thoughts regarding the challenges that retirees are facing out here. As you rightly said, majority of them, a number of them, I should say, not majority, will tell you that getting their dues has been a bit of a challenge. Is there anything that under your ambit in the Treasury domain that you're doing around this?
One thing that you can see we have done for cash preservation for the first 3 years, meaning that the dues are there. Because most of the time you find it's because the money is not there, or the money was invested in property, shares which have gone down, or something. So you need to do some good cash preservation of capital so that anybody going out has his money. Better even you have a lower interest, but you have your principal.
Have you faced any resistance from, particularly from the public servants themselves, around this transition? Because clearly it's coming with a deduction from their side, which many will not be happy about.
You are aware that to implement the scheme took some time, and this was because the sensitization was necessary, and to get them involved and to accept this. And we have a team and a corporate communication within the Treasury which joined us, and they did sensitization around the country. It's not enough yet. This thing has to be continuous, because there are some people still who have not really bought in the whole idea. But what I know is, now we've started recoveries. We are trying to put systems in place. Technology is important so that in a very short time, 2-3 months, they should be able to know how much they have contributed, how much the government has put in. And they'll be able to see it maybe on their mobile phone, and you can see it growing. Because right now, it's a pay as you go, you don't contribute, you have nothing anyway. Yes. Yes. So the buy-in is there. Okay. Yes. And that's why you find, what we've realized, that people who are above 45 are really asking to join. That's a very interesting part of it. They're all looking for it, because they're saying, why can't I join? You can join if you are 45 and you are going to retire at 60. You have 15 years to go, so why not? You can join.
Right, and that point by Dr. Odundo takes us to the close of our conversation on Business Redefined, where we have been discussing the reforms taking place in the public service pensions, and that follows the kicking on of the superannuation scheme, which took effect on the 1st of January 2021, moving civil servants from the defined benefit scheme to the defined contributory scheme. Up next is the Markets Report.